over the years, when times get hard, I always say, like, I look at a difficult situation when I go like, well, this is why people quit. This is when people quit. This is when people quit comedy. This is one of those moments when people quit comedy or stop doing it or stagnate. They don't quit, but they don't advance. And when I find those markers, those moments, that is another reason that gives me the impetus to move forward, to push through it. Because if I can get through that filter, that gets me to that next level.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Today's guest is charming, funny, insightful, with all-round great stories. Ivan is the man. I had a blast. He not only wants to strive for more, he wants to excel, and this is a philosophy I love and can get around. The conversation flowed so easily, and I was really happy to chat with Ivan and learn a little thing or two, while also having a great laugh in between. Okay, let's get into it. Ivan Decker is an award-winning stand-up comedian and writer known for his sharp, polished, and multi-layered observational comedy. He is originally from Vancouver, but is now based in Los Angeles. His first comedy special, Underwater Scissors, is part of the Comedians of the World collection on Netflix. He's had numerous television performances, filmed at the Just for Laughs Montreal Festival, the Winnipeg and Halifax Comedy Festivals for CBC Television, and can now be heard across North America on Sirius XM radio. He can also be seen and heard on the popular CBC radio program, The Debaters. In 2017, Ivan was named a comic to watch by TBS at the New York Comedy Festival, and subsequently made his US television debut on Conan. His debut comedy album, I Wanted to Be a Dinosaur, was the recipient of the 2018 JUNO Award for Comedy Album of the Year, which can be heard on all major streaming platforms, including iTunes. His brand new comedy special, Popcorn, is available on YouTube now, and if you'd like to listen to it, check it out in the episode notes. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about being on a jet, fitting in, imposter syndrome, his latest comedy special, discomfort, clowning, moving above quitting, and always wanting to get better. Before we get into this epic chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny in Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out at 3:30 Melbourne, Australian time, with the full video of the podcast to be released the following day. Okay, cool. Thank you. Let's get into it. I saw that you've been on a jet. I would love to know about this experience. I can see that you're smiling. Was this like, I've made a moment? Tell me all about that experience. I would love to be on a jet.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was pretty cool. Like the differences with the jet are not even the jet itself. It's still just an airplane, and you're on a flight. But it's it's the whole airport. It's a different airport. You don't have to go to the airport, which is the best part of flying on a jet. Yeah. Is you go to a different airport that poor people don't know about, and like everybody there is rich, and so you see like baseball players and whatever. That's where they're all. That's why you don't see celebrities at the airport most of the time.
That's
because if they're on a jet, they go to a different airport completely, and so you don't have to do any like security or anything. They're just like,
really?
Go get them. Like I
check
think there might have been a rudimentary metal detector, but there was no like put your stuff in a tray or what. They're just like, yeah, go ahead.
It's like, do you have paid for? Nah.
Yeah.
Put your drugs to the side. They don't care.
Yeah, exactly. And like we even flew across the border, and like that experience was like the border guards just like came out to the plane. They're like, oh, how's it going? Okay, have a good time. It was like very relaxed. And then, like, when we were flying here out of Los Angeles, you just drive your car right up to the plane and then get out and get on the plane. And then
No.
when you land, your car is sitting on the tarmac next to the plane, and they just hand you the keys. They're like, "Here you go, have a good time." Like it's like a valet. So that part of it was the best. The flight part was also crazy because like the pilot, there was one pilot, he came out and made coffee at one point, and like we were like, "Who's flying?" He's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. You guys need anything else?" He's like putting sugar in the coffee, being like, "I think it's a little bit not sweet enough. Do you guys want?" We're like, "We're good. Could you get back up there and maybe make sure that this
you
plane is flying?"
You just revealed all of the secrets to the rich, and that pilots don't actually fly their planes.
Yeah,
Mind blowing stuff.
yeah, exactly. But the funniest part was I was opening for a comedian who got the jet for me, and was like when I first I find out we're going to go on the jet, we're going to do these shows. And the other thing is like there's no hotel if you have a jet. You do the show, you get on the jet, you go home. You don't have to stay overnight. The jet is instead of the hotel. So like as soon as you walk off stage, you fly, you sleep in your own bed every night if it's close enough, because we were doing the West Coast run of Canada and the United States. And so we do the whole tour, and the first show is in Vancouver, and that's the first time like the morning after the Vancouver show is like, okay, you're doing the jet, we're going to go to Portland. And I get to go to this like private jet place, and I'm like, oh, this is all very exciting. And then I'm like, all right, I got to play it cool. I don't want to be embarrassing. I'm trying to be a Canadian, trying to be nice. So like as soon as we were walking to the jet, I was just kind of like, whatever, no big deal. I didn't take any pictures or anything. I was just kind of like, yep, all right, no problem. Let's go. Where am I sitting? Okay, back there. Yeah, sure.
Like I've done this 100 times before.
Yeah, tried to be like, it's not a big deal for me. I'm actually, I fit in well. And then we do the tour. We get to LA, the last show, and my manager's there, and she goes up to the community. She's like, "How's the tour been with Ivan?" And he goes, "Who's this guy think he is? I get him a jet. He doesn't take a single picture. He doesn't care. He doesn't make a big deal. It's a jet, man." And then I was like, "Oh, okay. I'll take a picture tomorrow."
I could just imagine being on the jet, and there are like a couple of people who are like frequent flyers on the jet, and they're all just having normal conversation, and you're like just staring at the fabric of the chairs, like this is remarkable. Like you obviously played the ratio like too cool. I would have been like ordering food. I would have been looking around, just like touching everything. I wouldn't have been able to keep my cool. So I guess that's a really important skill. So
pretending. I've done a lot of like just pretending to fit in my career. It's like a lot of that like fake kind of like acting like I'm in, like in with the successful crowd. Like when I do corporate events, I wear a suit. I wear a suit most of the time on stage anyway, but I do these events and I'm like just trying to act like I'm like a kid. I'm from a small town at the end of a river. Like I think they can tell, but I'm still trying to pull it off.
I think you pulled it off very well, and I've seen you wear the suits in like 100 gigs. I think that you fit in the crowd very well. I'm wondering, and this could be a big stretch, I think very early on in your career, you were performing at a yacht club, and you were doing material where, I don't know what the term is, but you were like poor man material, and everyone at the yacht is obviously quite wealthy. Do you reckon it was sparked then when you're like, you know what, I'm going to like show them that I fit in? Or was this always part of the...
Yeah, I think it was that like I think they booked me because they're like, this guy owns a Blazer. Come on down. And so, but yeah, I definitely realized like partway through the set as I'm doing jokes about the bus and like subway, I was like, oh, I don't think you guys know what I'm talking about.
What's a bus?
Yeah. And I told them, I was like, all right, if anybody here wants some great observational material about your lives, all you need to do is give me several $1 million. Let me live as you for a few years. I'll write jokes just for you. It'll be all stuff about things we rich people worry about.
It's a win-win.
Yeah.
It's just pocket change for them as well.
But it's out there. Any rich person wants specifically tailored rich material. You send me the money.
I'll get in on that, but I won't necessarily deliver good material, and we can split the profits.
Yeah.
So do you think that like a moment like that kind of changes? Because it's an interesting, you're kind of alluding to imposter syndrome. We all have it. We've had so many very successful people in their own right. They also have the imposter syndrome bug. Is it something that you are aware of? How do you like play with it? What's been
Oh,
kind
for
of the
sure.
relationship?
Yeah. It's always there. It's crazy how far along you get and it'll never go away. I'm like envious of people who seem to repress it or suppress it, I guess is the right word, more. You always have people who are like this. I mean, you could see it on opposite ends where there's people who are brand new at something and they have an overwhelming amount of confidence. And you're like, you need a little bit of imposter syndrome, I
Just
think.
chill. Yeah.
This is too much. But I think that, in today's crazy world with that's such a cliche, but in the world that we're in now with social media and everybody's egos are at a 10. Like there seems to be no recourse for being just outwardly sociopathic. And so
You're
maybe
not wrong.
I should just try to abandon imposter syndrome, but I know that it's there. It's there for all artists. We always feel like, oh, is anybody, because it's this weird thing where you can't see your art the way that everybody else does because you made it, you were there. And it's just such a weird thing, especially with this putting together my special. It was so difficult to try, like, to see those jokes and tell those jokes so many times. And even through the editing process, like the whole time you're watching it, you're like, I have no idea if anybody is going to like this at this point. I've heard these jokes so many times. I've seen this clip so many times. This shot is all, and so everything is like, I just have no clue. I can't, I'm a bad barometer now. And so that's why I think stand-up is such an interesting art form, because you have to go out into the world and do it live, because that's the only way you're going to know if it's good or not. And the nice thing about it is we do get that reinforcement
Right away.
It's tough for other artists. They don't get that nightly. When you're painting something, no one's coming over you don't take the painting out at night to an open mic. And you're like, is it coming along? And people are like, yeah, oh yeah, it's good. Yeah, we like that part. That's a good part. Take that other part out, but this is good.
Yeah. It's very interesting, like especially like an actor, for example. You might do the acting, and yes, you might be able to tell from the people around you, but everyone's being very professional and they're trying to keep a straight face, maybe make your colleague laugh, but that might not be out for over a year. And you can't really tell because it's such an interesting game. So I'm
fascinated by actors if they're in a movie, like, because obviously there are bad movies.
Yeah.
But my thing is, like, do people know? Do the people making a movie, like, do they know it's bad, like, during? Because a movie crazy. Like, you're shooting all these different scenes. Like, you have no idea how well it's going to cut together.
So many moving parts. I think if you're doing like I've actually been thinking about this. If you're doing something like Sharknado, you're very aware that you're producing like a D grade film.
Yeah.
I appreciate the bad films that know they're bad films. Like, those like terrible comedy movies. I watched 10 minutes of it, but I couldn't watch anymore. Like the 40-Year-Old Virgin, but it was a knockoff of like Superbad. And the 40-Year-Old Virgin's a very good film. I'm talking about the knockoff where they get all of those comedies as one. It's kind of like a Scary Movie style.
Oh, yeah.
Like they are also Scary Movies aware that it's like a parody and they're not.
Yeah, like that kind of style of movie seems like it's kind of bygone, this idea. Because I guess people just do it on the internet now. They do memes of movies. It was crazy to have like entire meme movies, essentially, which is like what Scary Movie, not another teen movie. Like
Sharknado is my go-to one. But then
Sharknado is fantastic.
Like then when you see a movie, I just saw Dune. Like they knew perfectly well this is going to be a masterpiece. But there's so many actors that I've spoken to where they read a script and they think it's really good, and it comes out really badly, or the other way around. Like people can't.
Yeah, I guess you have no idea.
Isn't that wild? Like the best.
It's crazy.
I do screenwriting, and I read this script. I've read a lot of scripts over the years, and it was like some Frankenstein film. I don't know if it was, I'm pretty sure it was made, but it was a terrible movie. And the script was fantastic in my mind.
Yeah.
It was brilliant. I couldn't believe this script. And then when I saw it, I'm like, this is the worst film I've ever seen. I guess it comes down to like the vision, the actors, can they execute? Do they have the budget? But that has ruined my life. Knowing that I read this great script. Yeah.
Maybe someone will remake it, you know?
I hope so. I
I
actually
hope.
heard that they are making a new Franken, but like Frankenstein's been done to death. But this particular script was phenomenal. I remember
Yeah.
reading it and be like, "Oh my goodness, this is you don't know." But anyway, back to what you were saying with you got your special. Do you want to just say the name of it? It's in the episode notes so people can check
Oh,
it out
yeah.
as well.
Of course. The special is called Popcorn. It's on YouTube. It was sort of the first time I've done a self-produced special for public distribution in this way, too, which was kind of daunting. The idea that it's not selling it to a network or to a distributor. It's just kind of like, we're doing it. It's here. You could watch it. Please watch it and share it with your friends if you like it. Uh, it's the most work I've put into anything. It was,
Oh
I'm
wow,
very proud of it.
nice.
And so it's, it's been really good. The response has been nice so far. But yeah, it's definitely a different experience. But yeah, like I said, it's called Popcorn. It's on YouTube. You can find it. Just type in my name and Popcorn. It should come up.
And it will be in the episode notes. We'll talk about it in a sec. But I'm very curious because we've got the Melbourne Comedy Festival here, which is one of the biggest comedy festivals in the
Yeah,
world.
I've heard it's incredible.
I love it. And when you do, we're talking maybe 30 shows for someone doing like the most amount of shows. When you do, and you've probably done this material for over a year, what's kind of like the balance of, you're doing this material to get out this special, which is amazing, where you also need to enjoy it and have fun, but knowing
Yeah.
full well you need to perfect it for the special. I'd love to know kind of about the balance of being able to enjoy the material, because you mentioned you're not even sure if it's like funny anymore. I know it's funny because you've seen everyone laugh, but that balance because you've done it so many times of like fun and how to enjoy it.
Yeah, I do like tiny little things where I'll change like the way I move my hand or like the inflection. I'm always playing with that in a joke because the jokes are there. They're like the sheet music, I guess, if to use an analogy to music. But I let the audience kind of dictate the pacing and how it works and how it goes. And there are different little things that I'm always
Nice.
trying out. Like, not whole words, but if I think of something in the moment, it'll work. Now, for the tapings, it's always like, this is the, like, that's where I take the foot off the gas, or I guess I would take the keys away from the audience a little bit. Like a taping is it's much more on my terms.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I got to be the one who's really leading, because I'm aware as well that it's for the people in the room, but it's also for mass consumption and cameras. I mean, taped stand up is always a little bit strange.
Yeah.
And it's nice when you're doing your own thing because you can have multiple takes. I mean, the first several tapings I did, it's all like for just for laughs or for the CBC television. And those were all, it's one shot. Even Conan, right? It's like you get one hit. That's it. 1 5-minute set. Everything you say in it. This is recording. And it's going in the thing. They'll
There's
edit it a
no,
little
like,
bit if there's a disaster, but it's kind of like, this is your shot. And so you kind of learn how to be a little bit more forceful and carry it the way that you want it to in that moment.
do you embrace the fear? Is there fear? Are you nervous? Or you've been doing this for like 20 years, so
Oh
you
yeah,
feel it?
it's always there. I feel like there are some shows where I don't get as nervous, and I feel like that's bad. Like I feel like if there's ever a point where I'm not a little bit nervous, I think that I'm doing a disservice to the audience, because I really, I want them to enjoy themselves, and
Yeah.
so there's always that little fear in there. The kind of, there's a chance maybe they're going to hate me. I'm going to walk out here and all these jokes that other people have led me to believe are good are going to be bad.
Can you tell
Maybe
me about
tonight's the night.
that mentality? Because you've been doing, for example, this set, and you've done other comedy specials over your career. There's still the potential fear if they don't like it, because you've tested it out. Way more times than not people are going to like it. Yes, there's other variables, different rooms, sounding, people eating, all of that. But the materials at a high level. But then still trying to like figure out like, are they going to like me or not? Is that just like a comedian's curse, or is that you being like, they pay good money, I want to respect them? Is it a combination of the few? What
I think
goes
it's a
on?
combination of both. Yeah. Like I do think that it's, I think there's some people who are like, I don't care about the audience. This is all about me. Uh, Not a lot of them, but like I think every comedian we want these people to have a good time for
Yeah.
whatever reason. Yeah.
Whatever. I think you want people to have fun, but yeah.
Yeah, either just for their own benefit, or you're like, I want them to have a good time, so they'll tell other people. Uh, there's a little bit of that too in the business side of it, but yeah, I always think that I like them. You know, I enjoy the audience like as people. I want to do that before I go out.
Oh,
Like I
nice.
like them. I want them to like me. It's a very strange thing where sometimes comics will approach the set as a battle, as a fight. Like the audience is your opponent and you're coming out and you're going to smash them and you're going to take them down. Or like my thing is like I'm inviting them on a little fun little trip. We're going to go together and we're all
Yeah,
hanging out.
I like yours. It's
Yeah.
lighter.
Yeah.
That's interesting because through my perspective, and obviously there's a billion ways to do comedy, but if you're inviting and you bring people with you, they're more easily on your side. But if you see someone as the enemy and maybe you've had to like change your, pardon me, style over the years, then you're already starting on like a negative footing. And it's about winning the crowd to a degree, well, to a high degree. So I find that a really interesting like difference in style. When you first started, have you had a similar style where it's been about let's do it together? I know you've obviously had to mix and match, but have you always been like that?
No, I think that when you start, nobody knows you, and like this is the benefit of creating a fan base too. Is you don't have to do that initial salesmanship off the top. I think as a newer comedian, or even just one without a fan base, like if you're in a room and it's not 100% your fans, we know and you know that you have to do a little bit of uh, breaking of that skepticism when you first come out. When you come out on stage, you know that people aren't, that's why a lot of jokes will or comedians will do a joke about their appearance or something more simplistic, something broad to just kind of be like, here I am, this is the show, here's the joke, this is what I do. And then you slowly force them to focus more into your style, but you kind of start open and kind of narrow it down. And so I always, when I do a headline set, my opening bits are as trying to be as accessible as possible. And then I start getting personal, narrow it in, talk about things. And then I, if I want to talk about something crazy or weird or very specific, that'll come later. Like it's very hard to come out and immediately do an 11-minute joke about popcorn. It's like it's not the same as you have to get people on your side and then bring them in. But if you have your own fan base, then it doesn't matter. You can start wherever you want, which is, I think, the fun part of that as well.
Very interesting. And I'm wondering from the nerve side, obviously, because you've been doing this for so long. How long is it? Has it been roughly 20 years?
Yeah, it'll be 20 years in November.
That is crazy. And also you look younger than me. And I don't even know how. I know you started.
Well, I started when I was 19. So.
Yeah, which is crazy. Good for you. The relationship with nerves, I would imagine it's changed massively over the years, and sometimes it could potentially, I wouldn't say the right word is worse, but as you hit higher levels, there's more people, you might get more nervous. What's kind of been the relationship from where you start to kind of now?
Yeah, I think it's just learning how to live in that moment, in that discomfort. Kind of something that I was told early on, and I bring it up a lot. I'll probably mention it again as we go through this, but it's just that discomfort is where success and growth, it lives in that. Anytime you are comfortable fully, I feel like you're not growing, you're not advancing. Look at a baby, they get teeth and it hurts. That's just like, that's where it all starts there. And it's this moment that the mindset that I had to approach with nerves is that like, yeah, this sucks. It sucks. It's gonna be nervous and it's bad. It's not, it's like, I know there's people that always try to say like, nervousness and excitement are the same emotion, just your perspective changes, which I guess scientifically, sure, that's fine. I've never been able to just like flip it and be like, no, I'm excited. It's great. You're lying. It's not exciting. And so, but in that moment, in that headspace, that few minutes before I go on stage, and to me, it expands out too, depending on the I would say, I guess, like the gravity of the show, it'll push forward earlier into the day. So like I would have to explain to my wife when we first started going out that if I have a show that night, I am going to get weird the closer we get to me leaving for the show. So like, even though I haven't left the house yet, we're 2 hours out from showtime. For that last hour, I'm probably not going to be there's like a pre-show thing that I get in, my mind is starting to focus in. And that nervousness, I've learned how to use that that's where I build it and figure out, and I just become more aware, and I just think about solely the set. On my other focuses, like you can't, like for example, just like as a married person, like you can't bring up like bills or like laundry or like what are we doing next week? Like if I'm an hour before going on stage, I'm like, stop that. I need my entire brain to focus on this show I'm about to do. I can't talk to you about that. That's crazy.
Yeah. I'm going to use
And so I think before I go on, if I'm nervous, I use that. It's uncomfortable, but I look at my set list, I go over things, I think about lines, I think about transitions, I make sure that I know where the jokes are going to go, and it's still there, but it's like it's just part of the ritual.
I love it. Yes, you spelt it out perfectly. And I'm wondering, you said the advice you were given. So did you have to have a mindset shift, or did someone just give you advice and you decided to play around with it and make it your own?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have that mindset originally. Originally, I was like, oh, someday I won't be nervous. I'll be the best. And I won't feel this. And then now I'm like, I think everybody feels it. It's why you see it all the time in everything too. Like professional sports is a big one. The mental aspect of that is so crazy. Like they've now started getting like headspace coaches on a lot of these teams.
Yeah.
Because before they didn't know anything. They were just like, I don't know, smoke a cigarette. It'll be fine. But now they actually there's MLB, like baseball pitchers who were incredible. And then they have one bad game and it blows it. They lose their confidence. They can't throw a strike anymore. Like it happens all the time. And it's weird because like mechanically they were incredible. Same. They were throwing 99 miles an hour right down the middle or spotting the corners, whatever they needed to do. But then something happens, causes that block in their brain somewhere, and you have to get it out. So I think that like that pressure, even if you say that you don't feel it or that you're finding a way to step over it, it's in there and it can come back. So you have to learn to like be friends with it, I think, a little bit.
I agree. And that's why I've had a few sports people on the podcast. And I think that's why they do like such a strong routine. And it's similar to what you're talking about, like an hour before, 2 hours before. It's just kind of getting into that groove. Like if it's a ball-based sport, what are they going to do? Kick it, bounce it, do certain things like 6 hours in the lead up. Are they going to turn left when they go through this corner? Like crazy stuff, or what are they going to eat before? And I guess that's potentially a way for some people to try and have a better relationship mentally so they can reduce the blocks. But it blows my mind with some people's routine. It's not like 10 minutes before, 20 minutes before. It's like 8 hours, 6 hours before. Yeah.
That's why I think that like they make fun of musicians and performers for their crazy riders, right? Of like, what do you want in the green room? And you're like, you don't understand the things that I have to do before I walk out there and act like this is the simplest thing anybody's ever done, and we're just having a regular conversation and it's hilarious. You don't see what goes on behind the scenes. Like I have to have a specific, this isn't me personally, but there are comedians who are like, I need this exact meal. I need this fruit, and then I have to have a cup of tea at this exact temperature, and then I do that, and then I can come out. And if I don't have that, it's you're free. It can cause this freak out where you're like, if I don't have that, this is going to be a bad show. It's not going to be good. So it's this weird kind of thing where like, the pre-show ritual, whatever these routines you have in your mind, and I feel like it's intrinsic. I feel like it's right in our DNA. I think everybody does it for everything, and it's such an interesting thing for me to look at. I agree.
No, also it's a nice way to realize that maybe the performer's not being a diva, unless if like there's some outrageous request. But like I know that someone wanted 2 filtered waters, and I completely get that. And that was in their contract. And like, how outrageous is this? I'm like, okay, if you want filtered water, I like filtered water. But if you want like specifically 2 bottles of water, you want to stay hydrated. Like, how's that a bad request? But I'm also thinking from the green room side, knowing me, not that I've ever been in the green room, everyone's like talking and like playing and bantering. I would just be like sitting, not being myself, just like focusing, going over my set, what's kind of the balance of like being cool and funny with the other comedians while also not trying to like shit yourself because you're trying to focus on the
Yeah.
set?
I have to learn to focus. I mean, that was a big transition recently in having a kid. Is I didn't see comedians for a long time, right? It was like me at home, and even through the pandemic. And so I had this like social, uh, I had this need where it was like my social bank account was in the red. So I really wanted to see people and like hang out. And I kept neglecting that aspect of it. Like I would go to a show and I'd be just so excited to see my friends and see other comedians that I would joke around with them. I'd be watching the show and then I'd be like, "Oh, you're up," and I'd be like, I didn't take the time to look at my set. I was just like too. It was like way too much fun just like chatting with people.
Yeah.
So I can fall into that for sure. And so I do need to take time. For me, the big thing was I'm on a tour with a bunch of other comedians. It's nice if we have a green room and separate dressing rooms because I'll go to my dressing room and like as I'm getting changed, that's when I'll do the kind of rituals of like look at my set list, figure out what I'm going to do, and then I don't go out to the stage until or to the green room until I've like got everything locked in. But then also the attitude of like some people need that. Some people need that riffing in the green room to feel funny before they go on. They need that last little social reinforcement before they go out to like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm funny. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be fine. But I've always found that, you know, I've fallen into that too, but I try not to need anything because it's not always gonna be there. You know, I do a lot of gigs where it's just me. And I have nobody to like riff with or chat with. I mean, you can text people now. That's the big thing.
But even still, like, let's just say you're driving, which I know you would have done. I'm not sure if you're doing anymore. Like, you're driving 2 hours to a gig, or maybe it's a corporate gig, or it's an hour. Yes, you can like be on the phone, but you get there, you're kind of waiting like maybe 15, 20 minutes to do your thing. To me, I'd be like, oh, I've just got out the car. Like, what am I doing? Where do I go? More focused on that stuff. And so that's why I can appreciate the green room, just having someone to like banter with, just to kind of like flick the switch. But it's a weird concept. You get out the car. You don't know anyone. You're performing to like let's say, a corporate event. You don't quite know the vibe of the corporates. You get up there and then you have to kind of like just figure out like what's their type of, you know, style. What are they like? That to me is quite daunting.
Yeah. Corporates are really weird because it's not a comedy club. You've come to their house. Yeah. So it's like a very different experience. And if the audience is like, you know, they might not even know how to be a comedy audience too, right?
Interesting.
Like they don't know they're supposed to laugh every time. Like I've had audiences where they're like, we didn't want to interrupt you with our laughter.
Please do. Yeah.
They were like, they would clap. There was a lot of clapping. It was like they were like a theater crowd, I guess. They were like used to this, and then there was no like. I was like, okay, yeah, you can just laugh as much as you want. And then they would like. There's even situations where like people were laughing and they were shushed as well by like other people. It's very strange.
Also with corporate, you know, depending on the number or the business, you might like. I've got a very dark sense of humor. I am going to laugh at things that aren't appropriate to potentially my old colleagues. And that has happened to me before. And you laugh and you just look at them and like shake the head. And it's such a weird dynamic.
It's totally different. You're at work. You know, work you and home you are usually two different people.
Yeah.
Very rarely do people have the fortunate situation where they can have a job where they're completely themselves around their coworkers. You're in a room with your boss. You're going to be weird. There's still a layer of like, I'm at work right now. I can't laugh a lot. I don't want to draw attention to myself. I'm trying to keep my head down to the end of this quarter. If he remembers I exist, he might fire me. You know, all that stuff. Yeah. So you have to be aware that all of that is happening. It's such a weird environment to do comedy in, but it's very challenging. And if you can get good at it, it's great.
I only realized a few years ago that in Australia, we have some comedians that just work with corporates. That's their main gig. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought it was like a subset of doing comedy.
Yeah.
They become really like strong at it, and that's what they do. And it blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very lucrative. It's certainly a lot more lucrative more quickly than, you know, doing the club route, the building an audience route. Like if you can just get a good corporate hour and get in there and just do that the whole time, I have friends of mine because Canada is it's a small market. And so I think for us, that was a big thing when I moved to the United States as well, was figuring out that you really have to be as broad as possible in Canada because there's not as many people. And so you want to try to appeal to everybody and do everything. And so you have to take the corporate gigs, the club gigs, all that different stuff. And so to be like a sort of specifically focused comedian, that was sort of foreign to me until I got down here and I realized like, oh, there's enough people here that, yeah, you could just do corporates every weekend for the entire year.
Yeah. It's so like, and you can do the same 5, 10, 15 minutes for the rest of your life as well. I don't think it would interest you at all because I know that you like to try new material. Yeah, I can see you smiling. And I guess that's going back to your comedy special. You know, you try the material for the comedy special and then you somewhat retire them and then you move on to the new stuff. Is that kind of the mentality with you?
Yeah, like I want people who have, if they watch my special, they come and see me because of that. They're not going to hear the same stuff that they've just seen. So I want to make sure that I have different stuff. Sometimes I'll reach back and do stuff from like 2 or 3 specials ago. And if I'm messing around, like if I'm in a development stage, which I'm in now, like if you come see me now, you're going to get like a bunch of new stuff that's not on the special. And then like, you know, maybe some older stuff depending on how I'm feeling. But I'm still putting together the next special. But that's the fun part for me.
That's quick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whatever. It's just like whatever the next hour is. If it becomes...
Yeah, but still to go straight onto the next thing. That's...
Yeah.
You love
that's
your comedy.
That's just kind of how it is now. I mean, it didn't used to be. You used to be able to tour your act for 10 years, right?
Yeah, and do this. Yeah. Is that because of lack of social media?
I think so, yeah. And even just the idea of a special. Like, not everybody did a special. You got an HBO special. There was like maybe 10 comedians that got one. And that was it. And then maybe you get a DVD and you release it, but it's like you didn't really have the same kind of ravenous need for new stuff that we have now. And so it's a very different thing. I think that's why a lot of people are trending towards more improvisational styles of stand-up comedy. That's I guess a better experience if you want to see people more than once. Yeah. To me, I like a show. I like a really good show, you know, with carefully crafted bits and material that goes somewhere, takes you on a journey. The randomness of the improvisation is frightening to me, even as an audience member. Like if I were to go and see something and they were like, yeah, this, because if it's randomized, I don't know. I would have this fear as an audience member that like, I might not be at the best show of the weekend.
Interesting.
Because if they're making it up, you could be in a room full of duds. The crowd could be bad. Yeah. And so you might be you might be like, oh, that was pretty fun. And then someone would be like, oh, I went on Friday. And it was crazy. There was a lady did this thing and he did all this stuff was so much fun. And you're like, I missed it. But if it's the same show, you have that benefit of like, you come to any 5 shows I'm doing in your city, they're going to be the same. You're not going to be deprived of a good time or good material because of the audience didn't take me in that place. It might be more fun in the room, obviously, like people's responses change the way that the room feels, and there are good shows and bad shows with the same material. But I just think that like I want to be able to have somewhat of a guarantee quality control, you know. That's why you go to Starbucks, because the coffee's the same wherever you go.
It's not good, but it's the same. But unlike you, yours is good all the time. I've always admired there's very few comedians that can do it well, but being able to play with the audience, because I saw a comedy show and there was a little bit of crowd work, and the difference between good and bad crowd work. I don't think it was a comedian thing. I actually think it was an audience thing, because the comedians we saw were quite great. But then one person got up and was so annoyed that they didn't bag Sweden. The guy was bagging all these different countries, but not Sweden. And so the next like 2 comedians came up and just did like stupid Swedish bits, which didn't even make sense just because the other person said it. Then they were referring, or there was like what's a group where 3 people are dating?
Oh, like a throuple?
Throuple, yeah. And so that came up accidentally, and then only at the end of one person's set. So then the other comedian got to work with that, and I found it very funny. But then someone was like, what do you do? And there was like dentist, and he's like, I got nothing. And they just moved on. But I find it all funny. But I understand what you're saying is that there's a high risk to reward, or you can just move on and Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I love those magical moments. That's really the fun of seeing stand up live, and it's why it should be seen live. That's the best way to see it because those things can happen. But I think that they're hard to plan. That magic is very hard to plan
Oh,
for. And so if you don't have those magic moments to try to create an hour of that, to me it just seems very uh very difficult. But I guess, some people can do it very well.
well, it's like 1 in 1,000 when you have situations like that. Did you
Yeah.
also, I read about this, so I'm not that confident. Did you also do like improv or sketch early on? Did you
I took a
try?
couple of like classes to try
Yeah.
to bolster my comedy ability because when I started, all I knew, we didn't even have the internet really when I started. Like you could sort of Google like how to be a stand-up comedian, but there was no
Like a wiki guide, like
resources.
get up, put the microphone on,
Yeah,
stand.
there
Yeah.
was none of that. It was like, it was 2005 or six, whenever it was. I can't remember. But it was like a very weird and different time. So all I had was like the Seinfeld documentary Comedian was like, that was okay. So you write your jokes before? Okay. Step one, I got it. And that was it. That's like all I knew. And so when I did comedy for a little while, I was like, oh, maybe I should do some improv and do some sketch and just try to experience everything I can and make myself, as good at comedy as possible and do a little bit of sort of cross training
That's
in
awesome.
that. And I enjoyed it a lot, but it's definitely a little bit outside of my sort of natural ability, which I guess is, I could have stuck with it more, but I found it was like, yeah, it's a different skill set. It's much more social, the improv and sketch, right? It's more like you have to be in a group and it's, I think you're also like, you're very dependent on your group too. And if you can have a situation where like I had two friends who were like these incredible sketch comedians, and then one of them moved away, and then it's like, well, what do you do?
Oh,
Now you can't do it.
brutal.
Yeah.
Very reliant on the other person. Did you also do
Yeah.
clowning?
That was how I started. So my mom, when I was interested in stand up, she was like, you should take this. I saw this clown class advertised.
Oh.
You should take that. And so I took this like insane clowning course in, it's not like Juilliard. It was in like a warehouse in like
Those are the best.
the Skid Row edge of, like, it was a very dangerous neighborhood. I was like, I shouldn't even be parking my car, but I also don't want to walk very far. So it's a real, we'll see what I could do. And like, yeah, just like in this old building, it was like a bunch of like artsy, crunchy people, to use a modern term. And like, it was very strange. But I get like, there are good clowns, but I was like also like, as a kid came from no money, I also had a very like business mind at the beginning of stand up. I was like, I don't think there's any money in being a clown. Who are the famous clowns? There's nobody that's like killing it. Like you never run into somebody at an Audi dealership and you're like, what are you? I'm a clown. I do clown stuff. That's how I made my millions.
I think Sacha Baron Cohen started a clown college, and I think there's a famous one in France, but he's not.
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, France is that's the spot. That's what all the clown. France is the New York of clowns. The way like New York first stand up.
The word clown sounds funny to me because we always call people a clown if they're being like stupid.
Yeah.
And then this concept that there's this really prestigious, amazing like clown college in France. I only found out about this a few years ago. It blew my mind. I was like thinking about, I'd wake up in the middle of the night being like, there's a clown college that people go to and improve their skills. Anyway,
one of the people who was in that clown class did that. Went to France, like moved to France and became a professional clown. I guess they love it over there.
Yeah.
Because it's also, you don't have to talk. So like, you don't need to know any language.
Do you think in like France, the most prestigious jobs is like clown, then doctor, then lawyer? Like, is there a market for it?
I bet you it is. I bet it's different. I bet you tell people, like here, you tell people you're a clown. They're like, oh, it's how to make some balloon animals.
Yeah,
I guess
be like,
birthday
make
clown.
me my coffee or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
but
there,
it's like,
I would imagine, because you're trying, and you said a really interesting quote before, which I'll bring up, but I would imagine like this goes with your growth mindset. You know, you tried improv, you tried sketch, you tried clowning. I would still imagine some of those skills you still apply in the sense of, or you're aware of them, and that would have helped challenge you in a certain way. I feel like that would still help you, whether you're a clown on stage or not. Just having that idea or wanting to grow will help. Well, has
Yeah.
helped your career. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't regret any of the steps I took that brought me to where I am. I think that it was all very beneficial, but it's interesting too, the avenues that you can spend a million years thinking about the avenues you could have gone down, and what should I stayed in that class a little bit more? Should I have worked harder when I did this course, or I was struggling and so I gave up. Should I not have done that? That kind of thing. But I definitely think that it was all beneficial. Anything funny, anything that has to do with comedy that makes people laugh. I mean, I'm always very interested in that side of it too. And I've read if there's like a science journal about like what is comedy? How does it work? What's it for? What does it do?
Yeah.
And even just watching now my kid, like with the things he laughs at was very interesting. And I also used to work with kids, and even knowing that difference of like what kids laugh at versus what adults laugh at is very different. And so, yeah, it was always kind of, it's funny, even then in the, at like the kids performing job that I had, I was like, I'm not going to be a hack. I'm not doing toilet stuff. Because I had a friend, the other guy that I would perform with, he would do a lot of like poo and bum stuff. And I'd be like, I'm not doing that. But it was like, it would kill, of course, every time. Kill with the kids. But the parents would get upset. And I was like, I want both. I want to do some stuff kids and parents both laugh at.
And how did you find the right ratio?
I did a lot of like old-timey stuff, like slapstick type stuff. Big reactions to obvious mistakes, I think, is a good one for kids. Like I used to like spill water on purpose and be like, what's going on? And kids lose their mind. They're like, how do you not know? And like, kids love seeing adults make mistakes that they themselves don't make. Yeah. It empowers them, and that gives them joy, delights them. And I think that that's a good thing to do to
That's
a group of kids.
It's a great take.
Yeah.
Because, at some level, we're all kids, and we all want to like thrive and not care about like the failure side. And
totally.
You said something which is really awesome. If you're comfortable, you're not growing. And I have two quotes of yours, but I'll say the first quote. You learn nothing from succeeding. Trying and failing is the best teacher. And then ... New stuff will bomb, but that's how you find greatness. And I think that's so awesome, because when you're at a comedian at your level, there's varying different degrees, but the higher the level you go, it might be scary to try something new. You might not want to because people expect a certain way of you. And I think that's really awesome in that, as you said, almost 20 years, and that you've been trying to like push the boundaries, or not push the boundaries, but trying to grow as a performer when you can just kind of stay static, but you don't. So I'd love to know a bit more about this mentality.
Yeah, I think that it's just, you feel like you have this comfort where you're like, oh, I know how to do this. I know how to make people laugh. I have jokes that work. And that's why there's this part of it that you have to do. If you want to make new material, you have to not do the old material. It's going to, you can't be telling two jokes at the same time. And so in order to develop, eventually, you can have ideas. You can spend as much time on the paper as you want, but you have to tell those jokes to turn them into good material. And so that was like one of the hardest things too, of like when you get your first hour, when you have enough material that you're like, I can do any amount of time that I am booked for, and I will not run out of jokes. I have the material. I can do it. It'll do fine. These are all jokes that work. They've been tested over 10 years or whatever. Then being like, well, how do I make new stuff? What do I do? And that is where you have to, obviously the situation needs to be right. Like I'm not going to do new stuff at a corporate event, or like if I'm booked to headline, if my fans are there, like things like that.
Yeah.
I want to make sure everybody's having a good show. But if I'm doing a shorter set on a show, because there's a thing, it's funny. There's a weird thing where you're like, I want to just kill. Like it's fun. It's very fun. It's fun to kill. You should do it once a week, I think, as a comedian.
Oh, okay.
once a week, you should come out. Just remind yourself that you're like, I can do it. But then the problem is don't put too much pressure on it, because if that one set where you're like, this is the one I'm killing at, if that one doesn't work, you're like, oh no, everything's
I'll
terrible.
get another one, and another one, and another. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's good once in a while to have those good sets, but I think also the feeling of new material working, to me, that's the best feeling in comedy. When you have a new joke that is starting to work, it's starting to come together, you're starting to see the pieces, because you have so many jokes. If you're writing enough, you're just constantly doing material. It's like, it's hitting, but it's okay, it's fine. When you get that new bit that you like, that you're excited about, that puts a charge in you. It's great. It's like this feeling like I gotta get it out of me. Like, it's like this crazy, it's like a virus where you're like, I need to get in front of a microphone and tell this joke. It's so exciting because it's new and I know no one's heard it before. All of the stuff that you have, the imposter syndrome about your old material, isn't there because you're like, nobody's heard this. It's brand new and it worked last week and I want it to work again. And if it works again, it's like you're on this staircase. Every time it works well, just feels awesome for like the first 10 times. Then you're like, okay, it's an old joke now. And I lose the feeling.
It's still what I find, and there's a lot of comedians that don't get past a certain year or whatever like level because they're too scared. You can spend 10 years getting that first 1 year. And then I would imagine every year or so you're trying to like get new material or a new special, maybe not a year. That's the model here. It's very scary because you've been doing something that works. You've hit a level and now you might feel like you're starting out again. I know there can be a balance of new material versus old material. And what I've noticed is that not all comedians can do that, but then they're not going to be able to grow. So it's that relationship of fear. And, you talked about the excitement and also wanting to grow. It is a rare mentality and there's very few comedians in the world that have been doing it for 20 years. Most people only make a certain year and then go away. So that's been a bit
of a mantra in my development too. You're just reminding me of where I think I've said to myself over the years when times get hard, I always say like, I look at a difficult situation when I go like, well, this is why people quit. This is when people quit. This is when people quit comedy. This is one of those moments when people quit comedy or stop doing it or stagnate. They don't quit, but they don't advance.
Yeah.
And when I find those markers, those moments, that is another reason that gives me the impetus to move forward, to push through it. Because if I can get through that filter, that gets me to that next level.
Brilliant. And there would have been many moments, every single comedian, artist in the world has had this. There would have been many moments, I assume, in your career where you've been probably close to quitting. Has it been that mindset that has helped you get through? Like, are you quick now to being like, I'm just going through this period?
That'll pull me back from the edge. There was never really I came close a few times, I guess. I mean, the pandemic was a big one because that was like outside of my control. I was like, I don't even know if stand-up will even be a thing anymore. And so I was thrilled when it did come back. Yeah. But I do think that, in those times when you're in the dark place, it's good to think like, this is when other people would stop, but I'm not going to stop. I'm going to keep going. But I definitely have I think early on in my career, I was like, oh, this is when you're a real comedian, is when you're in a hotel room at 3:00 in the morning, looking up law schools, being like, I think I can maybe not do that. Maybe I'll do something better. I made a terrible mistake. I shouldn't have done this. But then, of course, you realize that you can't even figure out how to use the law school's website. So you're probably not time to get back into academia, and you may as well write some more jokes.
That being said, there's still something that has, especially early on, you might not be booking that many gigs or different, whatever. You're just not doing as well as you think you should. What is it exactly? Like when you're going on, you're checking to see if you do law, is it seeing your life with comedy and without comedy and realizing my life would be a lot better with comedy? Is there any like specific thing that you did earlier on as well?
Yeah. I mean, I always had jobs. That was the big thing I did, was I didn't quit my job to be a comedian until it was absolutely necessary. I kept comedy as this fun thing. Yeah. Because as soon as something becomes your job, as soon as your art, your passion becomes your job, and I don't care how much you love it. And I know that thing of like, find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life. There are still elements of it that become, because obviously everything, it's a sliding scale. It's like a thing where like when you increase the safety features of a car, people just drive a little bit more dangerously. We are always balancing whatever the situation is. And so now that I have no job, comedy's my job. It's a job because there are things that aren't it that are easier and more fun. Obviously, everybody wants to sit around in sweatpants and eat chips and watch TV, but you can do that all day if you want and then go do sets at night. Or you can get up early and edit clips and write material and book flights and email, all that stuff that is involved in stand-up that I used to do. And it was like all of it was fun because I had a worse job. I had another job that was worse. So I'd be like, okay, well, this stand-up is fun. And I think I tried to keep that for as long as I could because I knew it would happen. And it did. And then once stand-up is my job, then that's where you really have to start having the discipline where you're like, I'm my own boss now. I need to do things that I'm not going to want to do.
Yeah, it's I was just 200 things came up in my mind as you were saying that, and the discipline side is something that I might be lacking because I used to be an accountant. I can never go back. Yes, the money is 10 times billion, much better than what's happening at the moment, but it will change. And
yeah,
it's an interesting transition because I think with your work as well, you were taking a bit of time off, and they're like, you can't take any more off, and you're like, this would be a wonderful time to do stand up. And I think you bought a whole bunch of like beans and rice, and you gave it 100%. But it could still be quite daunting because you're still like new in that world. You have to, the admin side of a comedian is not, there's a lot, especially at the start. And you're like, oh, I have to do all of these things. And I'm just wondering also from the pressure side, because, you mentioned from transition from hobby to a job, do you now take it more seriously? At the start, is your comedy a bit more, this has to go well because this is my full-time job? I would love to know what happened at the start.
Yeah, there's definitely more pressure when it's feeding you. When you're like, this is it. This is the thing that I do. This is how I feed me and my child. But it's like, you definitely feel it when you start that you're like, okay, it's game time now. But I was lucky enough that I was working quite a bit. Like I said, I waited until the work was enough that I had to quit my job because I was like, oh, I'm working too much. And then, I had a very strict, like no money, like cheap rent, and then bought beans and rice and just tried to keep the pressure off of myself as much as possible because it can stifle creativity. Like anytime when you really need a new joke, you're like, I can't, any creative that knows there's these weird waves. It's like this, I don't even know. You can get very spiritual about it if you want to, because
I would love to.
It's just such a random, crazy thing where, there are people who feel they're like, I'm not even doing this. I'm a vessel. Like, God sends me the jokes and I put them through. And it's just that you just have to be there and ready to receive. And that's something people can tell themselves just to make them sit down and start writing. And it's like anything, any slowly progressing thing you want to build. It's just such a hard thing because a lot of people, especially when you're younger, when you have a job, your job is you do it that day. And it's, that's what you do. It's hard to do things. We break our lives up into days and it's like, this is the thing you do on the day. And then you're like, oh, I'm running out of time on the day. But when you're a comedian or an artist, and obviously it extends to anything, construction, architecture, like anything that takes a long time, it's this weird thing where like you are creating something in such small increments that the tiny steps along the way are so difficult and uncomfortable that you can find yourself not wanting to do it, even though the end result is something grand and great and you're so excited about that thing that you are building, but you still are like, I don't want to work on it today because I'm not going to get it done. I'm not going to get it done today. Or you do that thing where you're like, I'll just focus and I'll do it all in one day. And you can't. It's a very interesting thing to try to get your brain to figure out how to do something in tiny pieces over the course of a year. Like, it's so weird.
I'm just speaking out loud. So many points have like sprung to mind. Like, I know when I first wrote a movie, I think I was meditating. I wrote like 80% of the movie or the skeleton of the movie. And it just happened so quickly. I was just like jotting everything out and I could see most of the movie. And then like when I was like, now I need to finish the movie. Why I'm meditating? Why is it not coming? Or I'm going for a walk, or I'm showering. No ideas. Like, why aren't you coming? It needs to come. And I put like ridiculous pressure on it. It never works. But then when I'm in that moment of, I call it flow, or you're just more chilled.
Yeah.
But every time I forced, it sucks, or it's not as good. And I've had to. It's like this kind of like balance. I call it, I did not invent it. I know you're a science guy, but there's kind of a state which I call the genius state, in between sleep and when you wake up. And when you hit that kind of, you're nodding, so hopefully you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When you hit that right balance where you're about to fall asleep, but you don't fall asleep, that's where you get like great ideas. So that's why I do it through meditation. But if you get that balance slightly wrong, you fall asleep. And so I'm glad that you put it to words. You're a lot better with the balance of pressure and, what was it, the whole human journey.
Yeah, it's all about that. It's so interesting in what you do in that. That's such a cool, because I definitely feel that when I'm about to fall asleep. I'm like, oh, this is a really good idea. And I'll force myself to write it down. That's the other thing. You got to write it down. You got to write down everything. And even if you look at it and it's bad, it doesn't matter, because you've still written something down. Because the alternative is that you've written nothing, and that's nothing. Then you have created nothing. So when you're a creative, you need to create. You need to sit there, and I'll sit and write random words on a paper until something comes to me, or maybe it won't. Maybe today didn't work, but that's fine, because I still sat down and wrote for whatever I can, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. If I'm doing well, it'll be an hour. Sometimes it's longer. Like, you just let it, or but as long as you do it, it's just so weird. It's so weird how often and how difficult it is to sit down and it's fun. It's like, I like doing it. It's like people who go to the gym, right? Yeah, they always say like, you need to go for like a month to form a habit, then you'll like it. And I'm like, really? Because I hate it. I hate it the whole time. It's awful. I hate every second of being there. It's so boring. And when I think about going, I'm like, ugh, how many times can I count to 8? It's so stupid.
Yeah, it is very interesting, and you've got a great perspective in that you at least try it. I'm a bit more lazy, but you're right, that habit aspect, whether you get something or not, at least you tried, and that will lead to something.
And I go out, I fall off too. Like, I'll have, 3 or 4 days in a row that I'm like, I did it, and then I'll be like, all right, I took a week off. Something happens. I travel. Usually I'm away. Like, if I'm on the road, it can be very difficult to stay in your routines in that situation when you're outside. And so anytime I'm traveling, it's like very hard to make sure you stay in that stuff. But yeah, it's crazy now, because it's like, you look at time. We're all nobody has enough time. That's the weird thing, right? We're all like, everybody, I think, outside, even non-creatives, we all have like a bunch of shows we need to watch. Everybody has at the end of the day, they're like, did I do enough? And that's why we all have that like revenge bedtime, whatever it's called, where everybody stays up late because they don't want the day to be over because they didn't think they accomplished enough.
Yep.
They just spend that time scrolling on TikTok anyway. And so it's like, I stay up late. I'm like, not even using that time well. I'm just mad that I didn't use the rest of the time well in the day. And I think that to carve out that, whatever it is, 15, 20 minutes, you can do it. You can find it. But it's like, I'm always so shocked. Like, remember that, I don't know if you saw that thing years ago where it was like Mark Wahlberg's day. It was like, you got to get up at 4 a.m, like work out and then meditate, and then you have a lunch or breakfast meeting or whatever. I mean, it's like all this stuff, and you're like, before noon, I've already done. Like,
and then I go to sleep and repeat the day.
Yeah,
that wouldn't.
And then, what do you do for fun though? Are you fun? Are you having fun?
Yeah, I don't.
What do you do if someone asks you if you've seen a show or not? You're like, I don't have time.
Isn't it? I look at all like my surprisingly targeted like Instagram videos or TikTok, like, you're a loser unless if you wake up at 4 a.m. You're a piece of shit. You will achieve nothing. Now follow me for more content like this. Like, I'm never going to wake up at 4 a.m. It's never going to happen. It's just, that doesn't work.
I might still be up at 4 a.m. That happens a lot.
But I'm not going to be working at 4 a.m. That's the difference. I also have a theory. I'm not sure if you ever watched the show. I haven't watched it in like 10 years. But in Dragon Ball Z, they have this like time chamber where you can, I think it's only like 24 hours is like 2 years. There's no way that humans would still use that time well if they're in like this world where you're only aged for 1 day, but you're there for 2 years. You'd spend most of the time on Netflix. You'd maybe do a couple of push-ups, but we'd still waste the time anyway.
I'd go in there and be like, all right, Time to watch everything.
Come
Go
back
there
like
and
80 kilos heavier.
yeah. I ate a
Right.
lot of hot dogs. They had hot dogs in there. I didn't think they'd have hot
Exactly.
dogs in the time chamber.
Amazing. So that's our homework for everyone is to watch Dragon Ball Z. Another thing that
The
you
abridged.
mentioned,
Watch the abridged. You don't need to see Goku get his driver's license.
that is how bad is that episode? There'll be
It's
like
terrible.
3
Why do they do
people
it?
listening that will get it. The man can fly. It makes no sense. It annoyed me. It took too long. And I know
Yeah.
that half of Dragon Ball Z is just powering up where they're screaming. The voice
Yeah.
actors deserve I don't know what they're on, but they deserve a raise to be able to scream for like at least 7 hours before anything happens. Brilliant
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, that's that's my rant of the day. You also, we're talking about like your mindset around like growth and success and trying new material. I would also imagine, as we said, there's a lot of moments where you consider maybe quitting, but there would be milestone moments. So you've had a few comedy specials, you're on Conan, you're on that Netflix special, Comedians Around the World. Do you look at these moments and you're like, this is like, I know like I'm doing well. I've got these things when things aren't doing well. Do you have like kind of a reference point?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And those are just
And
so
the
nice
JUNO
to
award.
have.
Sorry. Yep. Continue.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, those are nice to have because it does give you that. You can look at that. Even when you're in your, like you said, when you're in your darkest place, you can look at that, be like, I did that. Somebody thought it was good enough to do this, to give me this, or give me this award, or that's why these kinds of things are nice. And obviously, like I'm very grateful and thankful that it happens. But yeah, that's those markers I think are the reason why I kept going. That's what kept me along because I never had the idea. I started stand up. I dropped out of college to do it, so I was like, this has to be the thing because I'm not going to go. My grandma was upset at the time because she was like, "You're the smart one of your brothers. You read books. You gotta go to school. You're supposed to be the doctor." And I was like, I think she was pretty upset at the time, but I think before she passed away a couple of years ago, I think she had come around. It was very nice to see like when I won a JUNO award and all that stuff. I mean, it's funny because like the markers of success for a different generation are like she had no idea what Netflix was, but when I was in a national magazine, she was like, "That is wow." A couple of my friends saw they read you in Maclean's magazine.
I say the same story. I was in our big newspaper here. I'm very grateful for the author that wrote about me in the podcast. It was nice, but I achieved other things in my life. My parents, and they've been so supportive. But when they saw that I was in the newspaper, like, my son has made it. He's doing so well. Like, Mum, nothing changes from that. And they were just so, like, you're on a Netflix show, Comedians of the World. I think there's only like 4 or 5 Canadians in it.
Yeah.
And
4 from each country.
Like, I can reach out to journalists now and they'll write something if I want them to. Like, it's not that hard. Yeah. It's funny, as you said, the markers of success.
Yeah, but it was I never knew it would be my job. I didn't think it would happen in a million years. I thought you had to like, I had no idea that it could be something that I could live off of. And so I'm very grateful for that all the time. The fact that I'm living off of telling jokes to people is far greater than I ever thought I would achieve. And I'm just so thankful.
That's amazing. I love when people talk about gratitude. And then that moment with your grandmother when she realized, you actually are a talented, good comedian. Was that a special moment?
Yeah, it wasn't anything specific. I think it was just like I saw it she would start like when I would come to town. She lived in Saskatoon, which is kind of like in the middle of Canada. If you look at a map, you'll see it's quite a small city where my dad is from. But she was, anytime I came through town on a tour or she would be excited, she'd bring friends to the show. We'd go out for dinner. And so, yeah, I definitely think she had changed her mind on that.
That's awesome.
Now my cousins are doctors, so that they're probably still
like, what a loser.
Higher up. No,
Fair enough.
Great. My family's been very supportive.
That's great. I remember my grandmother heard my podcast for the first time. She didn't know how to click pause. So she listened to like 8 hours worth of
Oh
podcasts.
no.
Yeah,
So
and
it just kept playing.
I was like, why? Like, didn't you have stuff to just like, oh, I don't want to be disrespectful to you. I don't know what she thought, but she
She thought
just,
you could see it if she paused.
I don't, I was so mortified when she told me this. I'm like, but why didn't you click pause? It like didn't register to her that
Yeah.
you could click pause. So she listened to 8 hours. I think she was potentially going to see a friend. She didn't see the friend, or she just didn't like even call because the phone's ringing. I don't know what happened. I think she
Yeah.
just didn't leave the house to see a friend.
Well, that's
Yeah.
nice. That's engaging.
Yeah, but I think she did it out of guilt. But she thought that I was successful because she didn't know what a podcast was. So she's like, maybe I'm on the radio. I don't know what she like thought in
Yeah.
her head. It's like this person you can access off the phone. I'm like, thank you.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Even like our definition too, in our generation, it's very different of what like a younger person, like my nephews and stuff, they're like this latest special, they're like, it's on YouTube. Like YouTube is better than Netflix to a
Yeah.
kid.
Isn't that what it blows my mind. Is it because of like Mr. Beast and he's like completely changed the
Yeah, I
landscape?
guess. I mean, that's just what they watched, right? The Zoom, the whatever's in between Gen Z and the babies. I don't know. I don't know what it is.
I don't know
But
what
there is a
anyone
whole generation of kids that they just gave the phones and iPads all the
YouTube.
time. And they were like, they're just very online. And like, I think now we're starting to be like, this, don't look at a phone the whole time you're alive. But you know, I think that generation they're very aware. It's kind of interesting. It's so cool to see their perspective being different than us. I mean, we probably had all kinds of stuff we shouldn't have done.
But it's also interesting on that front. When you were first starting, you wouldn't have been on social media, I presume. For now, they're like, oh, this video's got 1 million views, which is great. But that's the marker of success for that generation. The generation before you was like being on one of those, even though you've been on one, like being on a late night talk show. Like there's different variables. So I would imagine you've also had to kind of like change what success is to you, because maybe in a few years' time, it's going to be like what the young kids are talking about on TikTok or YouTube. It's such a weird
for sure.
game.
Yeah, I was always like, oh, you have to be like a big star or whatever, and obviously that would be nice. But I think for me, the greatest thing I could achieve would be just to be able to perform for my fans, like have shows wherever I go that people know who I am, and my art reaches people that resonate with it and like it and want to come and see it. And I mean, I have a friend who's a singer-songwriter, even like it's just so cool to see. He's not doing arenas, but he gets to go all over the country and perform for 40, 50, as small as that or as high as like 5,000, 6,000. And it's just, they're there to see him. They're his fans. So it's like, it's such a different thing as an artist where, like I was talking about before, you don't have to have that initial pitch off the top of like, this is why you should be happy that you chose to do this tonight. They're already excited when they walk in the door, and it changes the dynamic of your performance and your relationship with them.
Agreed.
To a level where I think you can achieve greater as an artist, because you don't have to have that, like I said, the sales pitch isn't in there. It's like they've already decided. They know who you are. They like your vibe. They like the way that you speak to them. And I don't know. It hasn't happened to me, so I don't know. Maybe it'll just be more pressure, because that's the other thing I found about stand-up is there's a real like, you look at headliners when you're starting out, you're like, man, once I start headlining, then it'll be easy. This will be, and it's like, no, the more success you have, the more difficult it becomes exponentially. It's just, there's more demands on you. Now you have a team of people that you're beholden to like, you have a manager and an agent, and they need you too to do well. So it's like this weird thing. I think I really wish I hadn't spent so much time early on thinking about how much better it was going to be later on, because all of the moments along the way are so fun, and there's different parts of each one that become exciting. And I definitely look back at times when I was like not as happy and things I was complaining about that I was like, oh, that's nothing now. I don't mind that at all. I would have loved to have been in that situation again. Like to me, the I've talked about this a lot, but the moment where you're before you start headlining, you're like a feature act or you kind of work the same club a lot. Like if you become a club regular, and you have the same comedians that you see, and it's just like it's very fun. You're kind of you have a day job, but you do stand up, so you see them every night. You have the same group of people, and it's very fun. And you joke around, and you can expect that they're going to be there, and you really start to develop this bonhomie, this camaraderie with the other comics that's so special. And it goes away when you all become successful. Once you all start headlining, you don't get to see each other every weekend. You don't get to hang out all the time. You're on your own. You're going away. You're touring. You're doing your shows. And so I really wish that I'd taken more time in that to enjoy, because all we did was like complain, like, oh, I wish I was headlining. And it's like, I would have been, we're having the best time right now. This is it.
Okay. I'm going to plug that everywhere. That's going to be in the TED Talk. That is brilliant. I love it. I need to hear it. I think everyone needs to hear it. You can enjoy what's going on in the moment. Brilliant. I simplified it horribly. What we're going to do before we wrap up is do a quick rapid fire segment.
Oh, sure.
So the first thing that springs to mind, but please take your time to think about it, and I won't interject because I'll derail them. Actually, before we do that, the last thing on your comedy album, what is it that drives you to keep on doing new comedy albums?
I think it's fun, like I talked about earlier, the idea of a show, of a set piece, of a thing, a piece of art that people can take as a snapshot of the moment in time for me as an artist. And it's something you can put on whenever. You can listen to it years from now. I just did it with a friend of mine. I went back and listened to his comedy album. He was nominated for a JUNO at the same time as I was. And it's so good. His name's Charlie Demers. If you have a chance to listen to his album, it's called Fatherland. And it was so cool to get to re-experience, because I used to love seeing him do that act. And I'd seen it so many times, so that when the album came out, I was like, oh yeah, these are the jokes that he tells on stage. But now it's just this cool experience to get to go back in time and relive all of those great moments. So many lines and jokes that I'd forgotten about in that 5 years. And they're just as funny. And it's just so cool. I love that idea. And so if I can give that to somebody else, that's why I want to keep making these sort of, this is like the best I can do right now. Here's 40 minutes. Listen to it for anytime you want, forever.
I love that. And, people talk about, for example, Eddie Murphy's, what was it called? Delirious?
Oh, yeah, Delirious or Raw.
Yeah, and that's just one of the many, and how they can love it and then forget about it for a few years, come back, really appreciate it, because the joke doesn't need to be like gone forever. I love that mentality. I think that's so exciting, because you could go back to your favorite comedians, you've forgotten their bits, rewatch it, fantastic. It's
one of my favorite things is to go back and just do like an album run on somebody. And I do it with musicians too, right? Where you're like, oh, I haven't listened to this album in years. And then you go back and you and you're like, oh, this is so great.
I love it. Now to the rapid fire.
All right.
What are you most proud of?
Ooh, this is not going to be as rapid.
You can take as long as you need.
I think I'm most proud, like just in general, like in my life, anything.
You can do your life and career. You can do two.
I mean, I'm very proud that I have the family that I have. I feel very lucky to have my wife and my kid. It's really special. It's, again, like something I didn't think I'd be able to do.
How come?
I don't know why. I was like, this isn't for me. I'm not going to be able to find something as genuine as this. We all love each other very much, and it's, not to sound sappy, but it's very special.
I think it's great that people hear this.
And I think career-wise, I'm very proud that I've been able to realize and stay the comedian that I wanted to be when I started. I didn't have to go through any sort of drastic style shift in terms of like I didn't, become very dirty or like chase any kind of comedy trend. I kind of like set out to be this comedian, and this is the comedian that I became. And the things that I've accomplished, I think, are because of that, of making sure that I did the comedy that I wanted to hear. And this is like I'm doing it, and it makes me very pleased that I get to share that with people. And when I find people that want that as well, it's very gratifying for me.
Well, it's contagious to hear that. It empowers me to know that you can live a life. You can live a grand life. I think it's really important that people hear these things. This is the hardest question. Who is your favorite comedian?
Oof. That's tough. It's shifted over the years. I think all time, it's hard. Bob Newhart is up there. I think just from a pioneering perspective, his interesting timing and his kind of, he invented talking on the phone as an entertainment thing. Mm. People didn't used to talk on the phone on stage, on TV. He invented doing this and doing one half of a phone call. Wow. And making it hilarious. And it's just so great. And he was so funny. Obviously, very of a time. I think if you go back, there's still some stuff, like the timing of it is still great. But yeah, Newhart. And then I think from a modern, Colin Quinn, I think, is pretty incredible. His live shows that he puts together, that again, it's so cool to see what he can do with the theatrical nature of everything. But yeah, when I started, it was Seinfeld, because I only knew 5 comedians at that time. And I still love what Jerry does.
I'm seeing him in a few months.
Yeah, I saw him recently. He's incredible. It's just anybody that's, it's very fun to watch people who are very good at something do it.
Yeah.
Anytime someone's excelling. So I think, yeah, any of those like observational stuff, I think you can tell from the style that I do, the comedians that you would list are probably ones that I've come across and enjoy.
You also remind, because you do remind me of Jerry. There were a few people you remind me of, but John, what's his name?
Mulaney.
Mulaney. You also remind me of him, like half of him. With like half Seinfeld. I know with there's half and half, but like a quarter of him, quarter of Seinfeld, a quarter of a few other comedians. And I love those. I like that type of humor as well. Do you get that often? Yeah,
I get a little bit of, it's funny, Colin Jost. I think sometimes people can't get past the physical. It's like, I think, Gaffigan is another one who I love.
Yes.
And that's like, if you listen to the material, people are very, you talk about food, you must like Gaffigan. Yeah, Gaffigan's incredible. There's just so many. Those are the ones I get a lot, is Gaffigan or Mulaney. And it's hard because it's you don't want to feel like you're emulating, because you get accused of that. But it's just we have a similar mindset and style, and that's just all it is.
But you've got a blend of a few. I'm surprised if anyone would accuse you of being one specific comedian. You're like, at least there's a few that others spring to mind, maybe not at that level. But to me, it's like the best elements. Like, it's a compliment.
Yeah. And I think that's what art is taking your influences and making an amalgamation of them and re-releasing it. And you can hear that in music a ton. Like, anybody that's anything is going to have these. When you go to art school, the first thing they make you do is paint other artists' paintings.
Yeah.
And learn all of those different styles so that you can then find the style or combine the ones that you want to be your style.
Well said. Next big dream or goal?
My next thing I would like to do, I think I'd like to do like a more of a theater tour where I'm like an hour-long show basically just do a tour like to my fans. This is the idea. The goal that I'm trying to reach is get to a place where I can go and perform for people who want me to be there. And so that's the what I'm working towards always.
You've put it out to the universe, so it's going to happen. Last question before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
Ooh, that I don't know. I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
I don't think there's anything. How old is my kid? Maybe people want to know that.
I feel like if I had asked that straight out the bat, I wouldn't be having a podcast anymore. That's a very risky question.
It is a weird thing, right? And it's I always want to talk to other parents about it because, like, once you have a kid, you're like, oh, I want to know, like,
I love
what was your kid like when he was my age? But it's like a very weird thing to just be a dude being like, how old's your kid?
Exactly. Like, I actually really like kids, but I'm extremely aware of someone like me approaching. So like back when I was younger, I'd be with my mum and like there might be a cute like kid like waving us. I'm like, Mum, I can't go to the kid. You have to come with me. I'll get arrested. Like, and I've got young cousins who are all like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I get it like I play with them. But the fact that me saying out loud makes me uncomfortable, saying I love kids. I'm very aware of the, and you know what? It's not a bad thing. But yeah,
it was weird to work with kids because then I would forget that I wasn't at work. I'd be like out. Like, it's very different when the kids are coming to a place where you work and you have a shirt that says you work there. You can go up to any kid you want and be like, hey, how's it going? Blah, 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 because they just assume that you've been screened, which you have. But then I would be out in the world. I'd be like on the train or like at the mall, and I'd forget that I'm like, I'm not in the shirt. I don't have the thing. And I'd go up to kids and be like, hey, how's it going? Or try to talk to them, and the parents would be like, I don't know about this.
It's you know, I don't even know what to say to it, but as I said, I'm very aware. I just play with my cousins and I keep it at that. So all my friends' kids. Great. How can people follow you and keep up to date with you?
If you want to know what I'm up to, it's mostly Instagram, I think, is the dominant platform these days, but it'll change. If there's a new one that blows up, I'll probably switch to that. But for now, most of my effort goes into my Instagram account. That is where I post clips. I also have a link tree in my bio there that says where my upcoming shows will be and when. And there's also a link to a mailing list there too. So if you want me to come to your town, join that. Send me an email and I'll try to see what I can do to get to, because this is, I want to reach my fans and go to where they are. And so I need to know where they are. So let me know. And that's awesome. That's all through my Instagram. It's at Ivan W. Decker is my Instagram. Also just Facebook, Ivan Decker is there. And the YouTube special is on the 800 Pound Gorilla Media's web page or YouTube page, I guess. I sound like an old person. Web portal, I think. It's theirs. Just type Ivan Decker Popcorn into YouTube. It'll come up.
That will all be in the episode notes below. Thank you so much. I love your forward-thinking mentality and like your growth outlook. It's fantastic. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh man, thank you.
I love how Ivan mentions that there were moments in his mind where he could have quit. Like us all, we all share these moments. Ivan accepts them, takes a step back, and acknowledges that quitting won't get him to where he wants to be. In fact, he uses this as motivation to move forward to the next level. This is a great framework in that success is on the other side. Ivan outlines that often when we have a dream or goal, we don't seem to consider the smaller steps. However, it's important to take a moment and look back and see how creating something is always done in small increments. Within this mindset, Ivan encourages us to really enjoy the process. What is happening in the moment and how we can have fun. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. When you feel like quitting, think about why you started. Anonymous. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.